This is an orientation video for new disaster cycle services volunteers within the American Red Cross of Chicago and Northern Illinois. We thank you for choosing to volunteer with us in disaster cycle services. We couldn't do this important work without people like you. As you progress through your steps as a new volunteer, we want you to feel welcome and supported along the way. So you should know about Disaster Workforce Engagement. It's a team that supports the hundreds of disaster volunteers that you've now joined across our region. You can think of us as kind of like a customer service team for volunteers. We handle things like your onboarding, training, deploying, recognition, and many other important behind-the-scenes tasks. Contact us anytime you need something and aren't sure who to ask. We encourage you to program our contact information into your phone. It's helpful if you can email us for most things, but feel free to call if you need something time-sensitive. You'll find this contact information within the email you were sent with the link to this video. Topics covered in this orientation include an overview of the Red Cross so you understand how we fit into our organization as a whole, a review of our region and the common activities that reflect the needs of our communities. We'll take a look at the systems all of us in disaster use to stay connected and keep everything organized. And we'll conclude by outlining next steps so you're clear on exactly what to do from here. The goal of this orientation is to help you decide which position is right for you based upon your interests and availability. Our department is formally called Disaster Cycle Services, but you'll often hear people refer to it as Disaster Services, or DCS for short. We're one of many lines of service. The others are Preparedness, Health, and Safety Services, which is known for teaching first aid CPR. Biomedical is our blood donation and blood manufacturing segment. Service to the Armed Forces provides emergency communications and social services for those in the U.S. Armed Forces. International supports the Global Red Cross Network and international tracing services for refugees, the Measles Initiative, and information and training on international humanitarian law. All lines of service work within the context of this overarching mission. The American Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. We also perform our work within the guidelines of the fundamental principles of the Global Red Cross Red Crescent Societies Network. It's important that you know and understand these principles because they can aid you in making decisions when working on behalf of the Red Cross. Humanity and impartiality mean that we help people when they're suffering, and do so without discrimination as to nationality, race, religious beliefs, class, citizenship, status, or political opinions. Neutrality and independence mean that we don't take sides when it comes to hostilities and controversies. And while we're subject to the laws of our respective governments, we maintain autonomy so that we're able to act within these fundamental principles. Voluntary service means we're not doing this for personal gain. Unity means there can only be one Red Cross per country, and it must be open to everyone in its territory. And universality means that while each Red Cross may do different things depending on the needs of its communities, every Red Cross society shares a responsibility to help other Red Cross societies. The American Red Cross includes the United States and its territories. It's organized geographically into 6 divisions. This structure enables us to leverage local knowledge, collaborate with partners and the community, and align with partners at every level of government. It also helps us mobilize quickly in times of disaster. We are in the North Central Division. Divisions are further broken down into regions. Our region is Chicago and Northern Illinois, so we're called the American Red Cross of Chicago and Northern Illinois. We serve almost 10 million people across 21 counties within this territory. Our region is further broken down into 3 chapters: Greater Chicago, Illinois River Valley, and Northwest Illinois. You're affiliated with the Greater Chicago chapter if you live in Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, or McHenry counties. Illinois River Valley covers Grundy, Kankakee, Kendall, LaSalle, Putnam, and Will counties. And Northwest Illinois covers Boone, Bureau, Carroll, DeKalb, Joe Davies, Lee, Ogle, Stevenson, Whiteside, and Winnebago counties. Regardless of which chapter you're affiliated with, we encourage you to get involved anywhere within our region. Disaster Cycle Services is composed of paid staff members and many volunteers. We're led by Adam Runkle, Regional Disaster Officer. He is supported by program managers and specialists who are paid staff that supervise volunteer leaders and workers that hold various titles depending on their roles. Something unique about this organization is that it's 90% volunteer-led. We're not joking when we say that 90% of the work the Red Cross does is carried out by volunteers. This is important because it means that our clients are counting on you when you make a commitment to the Red Cross. Many of our volunteers treat their work here like a part-time job. Within Disaster Cycle Services, we help individuals, families, and communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters of all kinds. These three phases, prepare, respond, and recover, are the key components of the disaster cycle. In a moment, we'll review the common activities within our region that support this disaster cycle. First, we need to review the differences between what are called steady and operational states. You may also hear some Red Crossers use the terms blue sky and gray sky. Steady state, or blue sky, refers to the activities we do at all times, like preparedness and responding to small-scale disasters within our region. Operational state, or gray sky, refers to the work that we do when a large-scale incident occurs that requires significant resources. You can generally think of an operational state kicking in when we need to spend more than one day responding to a disaster. A large-scale incident that brings us into an operational state is formally referred to as a disaster relief operation, or DRO. Steady-state activities must continue as usual even when we're dealing with a large-scale disaster. This means that even if you can't help with a DRO, you can still help out a great deal by supporting steady-state activities to make sure they continue operating smoothly. The Red Cross is known for its response to large disasters like hurricanes and wildfires. But a lesser-known fact is that we also respond to small-scale incidents like a single-family house fire. In fact, our region typically responds to 3 or 4 incidents each day, with a large percentage of them being home fires. Now, regardless of the disaster size, our response to it always starts locally. We call in additional resources as the size of an incident grows. You may have signed up to volunteer for large disasters, and we thank you for doing so. Given the specialized nature of how the Red Cross helps during any kind and size of disaster, we ask that you first get involved locally with a steady-state activity in order to be considered for a deployment out of our region. This will ensure you know Red Cross terminology, systems, and processes when the time comes. Plus, volunteers that are involved several hours per month have a greater sense of purpose and satisfaction with their roles and are more comfortable becoming a responder when disaster strikes. We'll touch on deploying again at the end of this video, including how to learn more about fast-tracking your ability to deploy with the Red Cross. Now we'll review the common steady-state activities within our region so you know what volunteer opportunities are available and the kind of commitment you'd be making by participating in them. You should know that it's perfectly okay to switch activities. So if you ever come to a point where you think that something else might be a better fit, I encourage you to contact Workforce Engagement to talk about it. The Home Fire Campaign is a preparedness activity where Red Cross volunteers install free smoke alarms. This is probably one of the easiest activities for new volunteers to get involved in, since it doesn't require a lot of work ahead of time to participate in. These event-based opportunities are great for volunteers that want to be in the field, working within the community, and may have more intermittent availability. Training is provided the morning of an event, and we do ask that you review about 30 minutes worth of YouTube videos prior to the install event. If you're not comfortable doing the actual installation, you can also help out with the support roles needed to educate clients and document our efforts. The Pillowcase Project is another preparedness activity where Red Cross volunteers teach youth ages 8 to 11 about natural hazards, safety, emotional coping skills, and personal preparedness. This program is great for volunteers that love to teach kids and are passionate about the American Red Cross mission. You don't need a teaching certification, but this role does require training that we would provide you with, and you'd also co-teach with an experienced instructor at first. Time commitments vary for this role, but you should expect to commit at least 6 hours per month during elementary school hours. It's an unfortunate reality that responding to disasters consumes most of our time. We provide comfort and help people with their immediate needs when they're affected by a disaster that displaces them from their home. Most often in our region, it's house fires, but it's sometimes other types of incidents like a gas leak, flooding, or weather-related incidents. The immediate needs that we help with are shelter, food, water, clothing, prescriptions, basic medical equipment, eyeglasses, mental health, and spiritual care. Let's imagine a single-family house fire. A call comes into our 24-hour emergency dispatch line. It's the Lake Zurich Fire Department requesting assistance for a family of 4 displaced from their home, and they have nowhere to stay tonight. The children don't have shoes, and their parents are at a loss for where to begin. A Red Cross dispatcher immediately starts looking for disaster action team members in the area to respond. She finds 2 DAT members who can be there within an hour and gives them the information they need. Let's pause here for a moment to talk about the realities of this dispatch job and the commitment that you'd be making to this vitally important role. Dispatchers work in four-hour shifts 24/7 every day of the year, so we need volunteers for this activity during all hours of the day. To stay current and practiced in the role, we ask that dispatchers complete a minimum of 3 shifts per month and attend the monthly team meeting. Since a timely response is so important for our clients, dispatchers must be able to work comfortably over the phone and using a computer in what can be a fast-paced environment. And finally, you can dispatch from home once you're trained and capable of working independently. Let's go back to that single-family house fire. 2 disaster action team members have arrived on the scene, and they're scoping out the situation. They work with the fire chief to get information about the incident, including how many people were affected and whether they'll be able to stay in their home that night. The lead disaster action team member finds the adults in the household, explains that we're there to help, and talks with them to find out what they need. Blankets, snacks, and water are quickly distributed to the residents, and even first responders if needed. As the family's most immediate needs are taken care of, the DAT members will soon begin to discuss other needs like housing, prescriptions, and eyeglasses. Eventually, they'll be able to create a case for the family and issue financial assistance for immediate housing and other things like shoes. They'll also be able to make referrals to other Red Cross teams that include health services, mental health, and spiritual care. Finally, the DAT members will coach the family on their steps to recover. A traumatic incident like a house fire is often overwhelming, so the conversation and materials about recovery steps are vital. Let's pause for a moment to talk about the realities of this job and the commitment that disaster action team members make. We use a 24-hour on-call system to ensure that we always have DAT volunteers who can respond. So DAT members put themselves on call in 4-hour blocks of time and stay tuned to their phone for the call to action. A shared calendar will show you what shifts need coverage and allow you to sign up for the ones that work for your schedule. Keep in mind that the DAT calendar needs coverage at all times, especially during holidays, overnights, and weekends, when many of us tend to be busy with other commitments. We do ask that DAT members put themselves on call for a minimum of 4 shifts per month, and that they be willing to drive up to an hour from home to respond. This also means that you'd be willing to respond to any area within that 1-hour drive. And finally, DAT members are some of our most broadly trained volunteers, so they'll continue to learn about related areas once required training is completed. This house fire we've been talking about is really taking a toll on the family. Among other things, 3 of them have prescriptions they need help with replacing, in addition to eyeglasses and a nebulizer for the youngest one. This is where the Disaster Health Services team comes in. When DAT members in the field identify a need for health-related items, they submit a referral, and someone from Disaster Health Services calls the client to help, typically arranging for emergency prescription replacements, but also helping replace eyeglasses and basic medical equipment. I'd like to emphasize that 95% of the time, health services are provided over the phone when we do this on the local level. It's really during large incidents when we might ask you to do this job in person. To consistently provide health services across our entire region, this team works on an on-call system that uses 24-hour shifts. However, you're typically not asked to work outside of pharmacy hours. We ask that you complete one shift per month to participate on the Disaster Health Services team. Again, you must be comfortable doing this type of work over the phone, as that's how it's done most of the time on the local level. Participating in health services does require a medical credential, which includes LPN, MD, physician assistant, EMT, paramedic, nurse practitioner, or RN. Students of these disciplines can work on this team with supervision. Going back to that house fire, they may have had a pet that perished, or even worse, a family member that might have passed away. Regardless of whether deaths are involved, disasters can be extremely stressful for those impacted. The disaster mental health and spiritual care teams are there to help clients work through their emotions following a disaster. Similar to a health services request, an on-call disaster mental health or spiritual care team member would call the client that would like to speak with someone along those lines. To be clear, these are separate teams. To consistently provide mental health and spiritual care services across our entire region, these teams work on an on-call system that uses 12-hour shifts. We ask that you complete one shift per month to participate on the disaster mental health or spiritual care team. Again, you must be comfortable doing this type of work over the phone, as that's how it's done most of the time on the local level. Participating in mental health does require a professional credential like a licensed clinical social worker or other credential that qualifies you to provide counseling services. Participating in spiritual care typically requires that you've been a chaplain in good standing with another organization. Now that our family of four has their immediate needs for the first few days covered, they might need some additional help in the weeks following. This is where the casework and recovery team comes in. Caseworkers field incoming calls and follow up with clients in the days and weeks following their disaster. Since the Red Cross focuses on the first few days after a disaster, we're often helping clients connect with community organizations that are positioned to handle longer-term needs, things like food pantries, housing organizations, and clothing donations. Local caseworkers operate in 4-hour shifts Monday through Friday. We ask that you commit to at least 2 shifts per month. The casework team in our region uses a Google Voice phone number to make it easy for multiple people to rotate in and out of active duty. So you must be willing to download and use the free Google Voice app for your smartphone. And while we need caseworkers operating from Red Cross offices, you can work from home once you're trained. Now let's imagine that dispatch is receiving a call about a large apartment fire. It's estimated that over 80 units are affected and nobody will be able to get back into their apartments tonight. Disaster action team members quickly get to the scene and confirm this information. They do the best they can with supplies from their cars, but more DAT members and supplies are needed. Dispatch is calling more DAT members to the scene and starts contacting members of the mass care and logistics teams to help out with scaling up our response. At a moment's notice, the mass care team is prepared to activate the canteen, a vehicle designed to serve food and drinks at the scene of a large disaster. Large incidents often equate to longer response times. When clients and first responders are on the scene for many hours, they'll eventually need food and drinks. This is the first of 4 main ways that mass care team members help address a large disaster. The second way that mass care members help out is with sheltering. As the number of people displaced by a disaster grows, it may be appropriate to open an emergency shelter to cover immediate housing and feeding needs. Providing meals, snacks, and drinks to large numbers of people is a key responsibility that falls within mass care. Feeding can be done in a fixed site like a shelter, but we also provide this service on a mobile basis from a canteen or an emergency response vehicle. The fourth main activity within mass care is the distribution of emergency supplies. This is typically done for the largest of disasters like flooding and tornadoes. We'll distribute cleanup kits, toiletries, water, and other items as needed. Emergency Response Vehicles, or ERVs for short, help the mass care team provide feeding services and distribute supplies within communities that might not be able to reach us. If you want to drive an ERV, you'll want to complete training requirements for both feeding and distribution of emergency supplies, since we need drivers that are qualified to do both activities. There are additional training requirements for driving and operating an ERV once you've completed training for feeding and distribution of emergency supplies. Since much of mass care involves the movement of supplies and providing our services from vehicles, the logistics team is heavily involved in all things mass care. Key responsibilities of the logistics team are to make sure our various vehicles are in a state of readiness, inventory, restock, and haul shelter trailers, drive large vehicles like a box truck, and supply disaster action teams throughout the region. Since large disasters can occur at any time, we must use every chance we can get to prepare for the next big response. Volunteers interested in mass care and/or logistics are encouraged to participate at least once per month, including preparation and response activities. You'll be encouraged to cross-train so you can perform multiple jobs. And it really helps when you can stay tuned to your email, since that's how we'll often begin recruiting help for large disasters. Next, we're going to review some of the lesser-known, yet still important behind-the-scenes activities that are key to serving clients on the scale that we do. Our External Relations Group coordinates with other organizations and government entities to make sure that Red Cross services meet the needs of various communities. They have a deep understanding of what we do and how we do it. New volunteers are encouraged to join this team if they have a background or experience with a government or partner organization. Commitments to this team vary, but having daytime availability is a common element across different external relations roles. The Disaster Services Technology team ensures that our technology is ready to deploy for larger disasters. So they work with hardware like phones, satellite communications, radios, computers, printers, etc. New volunteers interested in working with technology should join this team. We ask that as a minimum requirement, you participate once per month, which might include the monthly DST meeting, but also preparation activities or participating in a large-scale disaster response. Our Information and Planning Group provides situational awareness and data required for effective disaster management, including information about the scope of a disaster and identifying the needs of varying communities. Damage assessment teams fall within information and planning. They're using some really cool cutting-edge technology to map the effects of disasters, helping operational leaders make better, data-driven decisions about where, when, and what services are needed. If you'd like to work at the intersection of data and its applications in the context of disaster response, the Information and Planning Group may be for you. This team is another one that asks you to get involved at least once per month in some way. The final activity I want to share with you is disaster workforce engagement. Again, you can think of us as kind of like a customer service team for all disaster volunteers. We onboard new volunteers, make sure you're trained and manage a myriad of administrative tasks that support a volunteer workforce composed of hundreds of people across 21 counties. To be able to support the number of people that we do, we're always in need of volunteers who would like to help out with this kind of work. It really helps if you have 4 hours per week to commit on a fairly consistent basis and are comfortable working with lots of people. The Workforce Engagement team also manages training instructors throughout the region, so let us know if you're interested in teaching disaster courses. So far, we've talked a lot about how you can contribute as an individual, but in an increasingly digital world, it's more important than ever that we make an effort to connect with one another in person. You're a new volunteer joining a large organization, and we know it can sometimes be overwhelming to get involved, start connecting with fellow volunteers, and feel comfortable doing so. It's for this reason that we want to call your attention to the DCS Events and Meetings calendar in Volunteer Connection. The DCS Events and Meetings calendar is where you can find events of all types that are available to disaster volunteers. This includes in-person trainings, mass care service projects, monthly activity meetings, and many other events that you might want to participate in. Find the calendar from your Volunteer Connection homepage. Hover over My Shifts and you'll see the calendar as an option. I encourage you to bookmark this calendar and visit it often. Many of the events are open to all disaster volunteers. They're great ways to learn and connect with fellow volunteers. Feel free to sign up for an event even if you're not already part of the team it might be geared towards. This is a snippet of some listings on the DCS Events and Meetings calendar. Since our territory covers so much ground, we start in-person event descriptions with the chapter acronym and put the specific town in parentheses so you can quickly see what might be nearby. Some of our events are purely conference calls out of convenience for everyone across our region. So be sure to read the event titles and descriptions so you know whether an event is held in person or over the phone. There's also some color coding involved to help you quickly hone in on events for a specific activity. A breakdown of the colors is at the top of the calendar page. When you see events in blue on the calendar, it means they apply to everyone in disaster. So you'll see monthly volunteer meetings in blue, and we encourage you to participate in those regularly. Again, you should feel free to attend almost all events within our region, regardless of which chapter they fall within or whether they're geared towards a specific team. Since we're talking about Volunteer Connection, I'd like to point you towards some other key features of your homepage that you'll want to be aware of. My Profile is where you can upload a picture and update your contact information. This is especially important for your email address since we typically recruit volunteers for large disasters within our region over email. Hovering over My Groups will let you select group pages that are specific to local positions that you're working within. Now I'd like to zoom in on the links in the upper right corner of your Volunteer Connection homepage. It's here that you'll find links to our online training system called EDGE and the Red Cross intranet called the Exchange. Both of those systems use what's called single sign-on, so you should be able to get into them automatically since you're logged into Volunteer Connection as they use the same credentials. EDGE contains hundreds of online trainings that are available to all Red Cross volunteers. You'll be sent a course list detailing which ones to take depending on the positions that you want to work within. Use the search bar in the upper right corner to quickly find a course. Suggestions start to come up as you type. Results with a blue computer screen icon are online courses. Click on the My Transcript button to see the courses that you have in progress and have completed. Keep in mind that the default view for your transcript is to show you the ones you have in progress. You can change this view to see your completed courses by clicking on the drop-down menu that says Active. You should know that EDGE doesn't work on tablets or mobile phones at this time. And if you have any technical issues, the IT support number will be included with your course list. IT support is typically available Monday through Friday. Now that you're a Red Cross volunteer, all training offered by the Red Cross is free of charge. This includes First Aid CPR. Mention to Workforce Engagement when you talk with us that you'd like the promo code for First Aid CPR if you're interested. Moving over to the Exchange. The Exchange is our Red Cross intranet where you can find documents and information published by the national level of the American Red Cross. So if you're ever looking for the latest information or guidance on a certain topic, odds are you'll find it in the Exchange. I recommend using the keyword search box in the upper right corner when you need something. Back to your Volunteer Connection homepage one more time to discuss an important topic, volunteer hours. It's important for us to track the time that you put in because we're funded by donors and want to be transparent with them. Most of the hours you work will automatically be entered for you, but there are times when you'll have to manually enter hours on your own. Typical things that you'll have to manually enter hours for include driving time, meetings not on the DCS Events and Meetings calendar, phone calls, emails, reading time, and this orientation video since it's not housed within EDGE, which automatically reports your online training hours. Please note that you will begin to have access to Volunteer Connection, EDGE, and the Exchange starting the day following your next conversation with Disaster Workforce Engagement. This is because your application won't be accepted into the disaster line of service until you confirm which position you want to work within. Once that happens, it will take an overnight update for you to have access to these systems. Now that you're more familiar with the volunteer opportunities available within Disaster Cycle Services, it's time to decide which steady state position or positions you want to work within. However, you probably have some questions you'd like to discuss before committing to something. As your next step, we'd like you to call Workforce Engagement on 312-767-8019 to discuss any questions you might have and make sure you're on the right path based upon your interests and availability. Following that call, you'll be emailed information about subsequent next steps based upon the position that you want to work within. Typical steps once you've decided on a position are to complete a series of online trainings which provide the foundation of knowledge from which all of us in disaster operate. You'll complete a job induction, which is a crash course in how we perform the job within our region. You'll also submit a health status record. This ensures that we don't ask you to do anything that you physically cannot or should not be participating in. And finally, you'll receive instructions for how to request your ID badges. Since you may already be familiar with the Red Cross or feel confident in what position you want to work within, you can skip the call to Workforce Engagement if you like. Simply email dcsnewvolunteer@redcross.org stating the position that you want to work within, and someone will respond with an email detailing your specific next steps. If you're interested in deploying now or at some point in the future, you can sign up for a Deployment Q&A conference call, which will help you quickly move down that path as well. Deployment Q&A conference calls can be found in pink on the DCS Events and Meetings calendar in Volunteer Connection. Be sure to review the event description as we ask you to complete some pre-work before the call so we can have an informed discussion. Deploying with the Red Cross is exceptionally rewarding, just as helping out here at home is. You'll get to meet Red Crossers from all across the U.S. and apply your skills to serve clients in their greatest time of need. The new experiences you build while deploying will stick with you for life. As you consider possibly deploying with the Red Cross, you should know that it requires patience and flexibility. Disasters and their aftermath are chaotic by nature. Patience, flexibility, and giving one another the benefit of the doubt are essential to helping our clients recover. These traits are, of course, important on the local level, but even more so when you deploy. Only those active within our region will be considered for deployment. This ensures that you're familiar with Red Cross systems and processes before you're deployed somewhere else and are expected to work independently within the guidance of operational leadership. Most deployments require a 2-week minimum commitment. 10-day minimum commitments are usually accepted for health services, mental health, and spiritual care. Much of the work and training you complete locally fulfills requirements for deployment roles, but there may be additional training or other requirements to qualify for certain roles. And finally, thank you for signing up to volunteer with us. We look forward to working with you on this mission to alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies.